So the pandemic has considerably impacted on my life and research. I'm a social scientist and I conduct a lot of field work. We had field work planned in a number of countries, from Haiti to Ghana to Kenya. And unfortunately, we can, of course, not carry out any of this research. The research is all to do with how everyday violence impacts on societies. We want to sort of understand how it doesn't just impact on the individual, but also on society at large. Unfortunately, I also can't exchange with my colleagues at the university because we cannot gather in any sort of meaningfully sized groups, nor can I see my colleagues at the universities of Freiburg and Zurich, for example. So everything has to be done virtually, and I've teamed up with colleagues in Berlin and Helsinki on a big project called Life with Corona. And if you sort of write this all together, .org, then at the end, you come to our website, and we want to research how people live with Corona globally. And we want to sort of compare how people cope with all the challenges that brings to our daily lives. Food security, health, mental health, violence in the household, acceptance that people have of their government measures, trust in their governments, and how this trust changes over time. So the research is not just for the research in its own right, but we want to inform policymakers. So we want to sort of deliver better understanding how people actually stick to these restrictions, whether they stick to them, how they do it, how they make it work for themselves, so that policy decision makers have a better understanding of how to implement and enforce and argue for these sort of restrictions, or the loosening for these restrictions. Thinking of the future, I think the pandemic has shown that we live in a very globalized world. One of the important questions is how we should finance the cost of this pandemic. At the moment, we're incurring a lot of debt, and the debt is going to be paid by young people. But what about old people? Shouldn't they also contribute to this? One way would be to partly finance it through inflation. And inflation would devalue pensions, because not all pensions are completely indexed against inflation. Further way of financing it would be to increase tax. And so who should be taxed? Perhaps people with a lot of wealth. At the moment, landowners, so landlords and landladies, are still getting their rents, and maybe they should be taxed. We need to have a general discussion about inequality. So who is going to bear the cost of the pandemic? The young, the old, the skilled, the unskilled, rich or poor. We need to have more of a discussion about inequality and the increase in inequality possibly through the pandemic, and also inequality between the generations. The most important thing for research is the free flow of ideas and knowledge across the borders, across universities, to many different researchers. Only if we've got a diversity of expressions and thoughts and ideas can we generate new knowledge and make the world a better place.